Έχουμε ακόμα κάποιες θέσεις, όμως μπορούμε να καθίσουμε όλοι. Υπάρχουν και κάποιες καρέκλες ακόμα πίσω, όπως θα έρθουν κάποια ακόμα, θα χωρέσουμε όλες σήμερα. Επίσης, η λίστα με τις εγγραφές βρίσκεται κάπου στο χώρο. Όσοι δεν έχετε υπογράψει, θα κυκλοφορήσει για να τις συμπληρώσετε όλοι, γιατί είναι και απαραίτητο για να στείλουμε μετά και τις βεβαιώσεις για τις φόρμες των CPEs. Θα ήθελα σήμερα να ευχαριστήσω ιδιαίτερα την PwC, η οποία μας φιλοξενεί στον χώρο. Είναι η πρώτη φορά που κάνουμε μια εκδήλωση έξω από το συγκεκριμένο χώρο που κάνουμε στην Αμερικανική Ένωση. Φυσικά τον OWASP που συνεργαζόμαστε μαζί για να έχουμε αυτό το event. Τον κύριο Αδαμόπουλο, ο οποίος βοήθησε στη γωνία, δεν μας έφερε σε επαφή με τον Μάρτιν, τον εισηγητή, για να γίνει αυτό το event, το οποίο ήταν κάτι έκτακτο στο φετινό μας πρόγραμμα. Η ατζέντα της παρουσίασης είναι, θα σας πούμε κάποια λίγα νέα για το Athens Chapter, για το ISACA, και από μένα και από τον κύριο Παπαπαναγιώτου για τον OWASP. Αμέσως μετά θα προχωρήσουμε στο κυρίως μέρος που είναι η παρουσίαση και στο τέλος θα έχετε δυνατότητα να κάνετε ερωτήσεις προς τον εισηγητή για να σας απαντήσει σε ό,τι θέλετε. Ξεκινήσουμε λίγο με το ISACA Athens Chapter. Κυρίως κάτι για τα μέλη μας. Στις 30 Απριλίου είναι η καταληκτική ημερομηνία για να ανανεώσετε τις συνδρομές στις αιτήσεις εγγραφές σας. Όσοι δεν έχετε ανανεώσει μέχρι τότε, δυστυχώς θα γίνετε expired μέλη, και που σημαίνει ότι όταν θα ξανακάνετε την εγγραφή θα υπάρχουν κάποιες επιβαρύσεις στην εγγραφή, τα κόστη για τη συντήρηση των πιστοποιήσεων θα είναι πιο ακριβά. Έχουμε λίγες μέρες ακόμα να προχωρήσουμε να κάνουμε αυτές τις. Για όσους από εσάς ή για όσους γνωρίζετε οι οποίοι δεν έχουν προβεί στην ανανέωση της συνδρομής. Η όλη διαδικασία γίνεται από τον ISACA εξωτερικά, στην Αμερική, απευθείας μέσα από το website. Μετά τις 30 Απριλίου δεν θα έχετε δυνατότητα να την κάνετε online. Θα έχουμε τη δυνατότητα εμείς να σας εξυπηρετήσουμε. Όσοι δεν προλαβαίνετε με τις εταιρείες σας ή να στέλνουν εμβάσματα να γίνουν πληρωμές, μπορείτε να στείλετε ένα email στο info@isaaca.gr, στο κεντρικό email account μας. Μπορούμε να σας κάνουμε εμείς την εγγραφή στην Αμερική. Εσείς καταβάλλετε το αντίτιμο στο chapter και το chapter θα τακτοποιήσει για εσάς όλη τη διαδικασία έξω σε περίπτωση που δεν προλαβαίνετε να την κάνετε, αλλά πάντα μέχρι τις 30 Απριλίου. Την Τετάρτη θα έχουμε άλλη μια εκδήλωση στην Ελληνοαμερικανική Ένωση, το ISACA Athens Chapter, με αντικείμενο πάνω σε data privacy. Όπως γνωρίζετε, κατά μέλη μας είχαμε τρέξει στις αρχές του έτους μία έρευνα μελών. Σας είχαμε υποσχεθεί ότι θα σας δώσουμε αποτελέσματα μέσα στον Απρίλιο και τα οποία θα σας τα παρουσιάσουμε πριν την έναρξη αυτής της εκδήλωσης. Τι έχουμε προγραμματίσει? Μετά το event του Φεβρουαρίου και το σημερινό, την Τετάρτη έχουμε τη διασφάλιση ιδιωτικότητας στο σύγχρονο ψηφιακό κόσμο. Στις 13 Μαΐου θα έχουμε μία εκδήλωση με τον Διεθνή Αντιπρόεδρο του ISACA Athens Chapter, τον κύριο Ραμσίς Γκαλέγκο. Τη θεματολογία θα την οριστικοποιήσουμε μέσα στις επόμενες μέρες. Στις 29 Μαΐου έχουμε συμφωνήσει ένα κοινό event με το HACFE πάνω σε ethics, σε business και computer ethics. Και έχουμε ακόμα άλλη μία ημερομηνία για το πρώτο εξάμηνο στις 26 Ιουνίου, η οποία αυτή τη στιγμή κοιτάζουμε με 2-3 αναδευτικές για να οριστικοποιήσουμε τον εισηγητή για αυτή την εκδήλωση. Όλες αυτές οι εκδηλώσεις από εδώ και μπρος είναι προγραμματισμένες στην Ελληνοαμερικανική Ένωση, στην έδρα του Ινστιτούτου. Ανοιχτές για τα μέλη, ανοιχτές για τα μέλη του OWASP με το συμφωνητικό που έχουμε υπογράψει τα δύο chapter. Μπορείτε να έρθετε και επίσης μπορούμε να πάρετε και 2 CPEs για κάθε μία από αυτή που παρακολουθείτε. Στις 13 και 14 Μαΐου έχουμε κανονίσει με την Ελληνοαμερικανική Ένωση και φέρνουμε εδώ ξανά τον κύριο Γκαλέγκο για 2 ημερήσια εκπαιδευτικά προγράμματα, το ένα πάνω σε Access Management και το άλλο σε Cloud Computing. Είναι full day events και τα δύο, 9 με 5 δηλαδή. Είχαμε μια έκπτωση της τάξης του 50% τα μέλη του ISACA Athens Chapter μέχρι την προηγούμενη Παρασκευή, που σήμαινε και για τις 2 μέρες συνολικό κόστος, ΦΠΑ όλα μέσα τελικό, ήταν 400 ευρώ και για τις 2 μέρες. Αυτό είχε πάρει μια παράταση, όπως γνωρίζετε, μέχρι σήμερα. Σήμερα στη διαδρομή που ερχόμουν κάναμε μια επικοινωνία με την Αμερικανική Ένωση. Για εσάς που είστε εδώ σήμερα, τόσο τα μέλη του ISACA όσο και τα μέλη του OWASP και για αυτούς οι οποίοι θα παρευρεθούν την Τετάρτη, κάνουμε extend για άλλη μια εβδομάδα αυτή την ειδική τιμή. Αν θέλετε πληροφορίες, μπορείτε να δείτε ή πάνω στο site του Isaka, το δικό μας, το Isaka.gr, υπάρχει ένα banner που θα σας οδηγήσει απευθείας πάνω στο event όπως είναι στην Αμερικανική Ένωση. Τι άλλο έχουμε προγραμματίσει? Σας έχουμε πει ότι θα κάνουμε κάποιες εκπαιδεύσεις πάνω σε COVID-5 και θα ξεκινήσουμε με το Foundation Courses. Είχαμε πει και στη Γενική Συνέλευση ότι θα φτιάξουμε κάποια group, διότι αναγκαστικά δεν μπορούμε να καλύψουμε σε μεγάλα event αυτή την εκπαίδευση. Θα είναι κάποια group των 20-25 ατόμων. Το πρώτο group τελικά θα το κάνουμε 6 με 8 Ιουνίου. Αυτό φαντάζομαι να σας ενδιαφέρει περισσότερο. Ο ένας από τους δύο εκπαιδευτές του chapter έχει ήδη γίνει accredited, είναι στη διαδικασία να ολοκληρώνει και ο δεύτερος. Ολοκληρώνοντας αυτό το course, το οποίο θα το έχουμε σε ένα πάρα πολύ χαμηλό fee, στη τάξη γύρω στα 50 ευρώ, το οποίο είναι απλώς για να καλύψει όλο το logistics και administration και catering κομμάτι, θα υπάρχει ένα επιπλέον κόστος για όσους θελήσουν την τελευταία μέρα, η οποία θα είναι στις 8 Ιουνίου, Σάββατο, που είναι και η μέρα που θα δίνονται στην Ελληνοαμερικανική Ένωση, που θα γίνει και η εκδήλωση, οι εξετάσεις για τις πιστοποιήσεις του Isaka. Άρα θα είναι μια Isaka μέρα εκείνη στην Ελληνοαμερικανική Ένωση. Όσοι θέλουν να δώσουν το exam παρακολουθώντας αυτό το event που θα κάνουμε για να πάρουν τη βεβαίωση του COVID Foundation, θα πρέπει να καταβάλουν ένα αντίτιμο στα $150. Η διαδικασία γίνεται απευθείας μέσα από την Αμερική, μέσα από τον Isaka International. Μέσα σε επόμενες λίγες μέρες θα στείλουμε κάποιο email που θα έχει οδηγίες για όλα, για το πού, πώς, πότε θα γίνουν οι εγγραφές, πώς θα κατανοηθούν τα τίμια και πώς θα μπείτε στη διαδικασία. Δεν είναι υποχρεωτικά τα exam, όποιος θέλει δίνει, αλλά θα καθορίσουμε ως ημερομηνία εκείνη την τελευταία ημέρα του event, επομένως θα είσαστε Πέμπτη, Παρασκευή, Σάββατο, θα παρακολουθείτε την εκπαίδευση και στο τέλος της εκπαίδευσης θα δώσετε το exam. Γιατί για να δώσετε το exam πρέπει να υπάρχει accredited trainer παρόν και προφανώς θα εκμεταλλευτούν τον άνθρωπο που θα είναι εκείνη τη μέρα εκεί. Θα κάνουμε και επόμενα group. Δεν θα σας πάρει όλους, είναι αδύνατον. Έχουμε προγραμματίσει όπως να καλύψουμε περίπου 4 group των 20-25 ατόμων μέσα στη χρονιά φέτος. CPEs, από εκεί πέρα έχουμε έρθει σε μια συμφωνία και με την Αμερικανική Ένωση πάλι για να κάνουμε φέτος ως Isaka Athens Chapter, SISA και Risk Prep για τα exams του Δεκεμβρίου. Το SISA Prep θα γίνει με εισηγητές από το chapter μας, από μέλη του Διοικητικού Συμβουλίου, 7 με 9 Οκτωβρίου και αμέσως μετά θα κάνουμε ένα preparation course για το Risk στις 10 με 12. Αυτή τη στιγμή συζητάμε με κάποιον μέλος του Διοικητικού Συμβουλίου του Isaka International για να έρθει να παραδώσει αυτό το course. Φυσικά και τα δύο courses θα κοιτάξουμε να είμαστε στα πολύ χαμηλά επίπεδα, δεν υπάρχουν αυτές τις τιμές που θα δείτε στην αγορά. Ο στόχος είναι να μπορέσουμε να δώσουμε δυνατότητα στον κόσμο να παρακολουθήσει αυτές τις εκπαιδεύσεις, να προετοιμαστεί στο χαμηλότερο δυνατό κόστος και με την καλύτερη δυνατή ποιότητα. Έχουμε προχωρήσει αρκετά στο κομμάτι το ακαδημαϊκό. Κάναμε άλλες δύο συνεργασίες πολύ πρόσφατα με το Αριστοτέλειο Πανεπιστήμιο Θεσσαλονίκης και με το Πανεπιστήμιο Πατρών. Ενώ έχουμε φτάσει συνολικά 9 είναι. Η μία είναι η Ελληνοαμερικανική Ένωση, όπου δεν έχουμε academic advocate. Έχουμε τους academic advocate και έχουμε και άλλη μια συνεργασία με την Ελληνοαμερικανική Ένωση μεγαλύτερη. Και μάλιστα με το Πανεπιστήμιο της Ελληνοαμερικανικής, το οποίο είναι ένας διαφορετικό όργανο, όπου αυτή τη στιγμή είμαστε σε συνεργασία με τον Κωνσταντίνο και κάποια άλλα, τον Παπαπαναγιώτη και κάποια άλλα μέλη του chapter μας, για να στήσουμε ένα μεταπτυχιακό πρόγραμμα, το οποίο θα ενσωματώνει μέσα το curriculum που ζητάει ο Isaka International για να αναγνωρίσει το μεταπτυχιακό αυτό ως, ας το πούμε εντός εισαγωγικών, να το έλεγα Isaka Accredited μεταπτυχιακό, πάνω σε Information Security. Μόλις έχουμε κάποια νεότερα, γιατί θα πρέπει να περάσει μια διαδικασία accreditation και από τον Isaka και εδώ, θα σας ενημερώσουμε. Ο στόχος είναι φέτος, Κωνσταντίνε, να μπορέσουμε να ξεκινήσουμε. Ο Κωνσταντίνος έχει αφιερώσει πάρα πολύ χρόνο και έχει βοηθήσει πάρα πολύ στο να στηθεί αυτό το curriculum που ζητάει ο Isaka. Καινούριο υλικό πάνω στο site του Isaka για Big Data, για πολλά καινούργια προγράμματα. Μόνο όσοι είσαστε μέλη μπορείτε να κάνετε ένα login και να βρείτε πολύ καινούριο υλικό για να κατεβάσετε. Και κάτι τελευταίο. Είχαμε μια πρόταση προχτές από ένα συνάδελφο, μέλος της ομάδας εργασίας, το Σταμάτο Μπασά, δεν καταφέρει να είναι εδώ σήμερα. Έχει στις 19 Μαΐου ένα φιλανθρωπικό αγώνα τρεξίματος ο οποίος είναι για μικρά παιδιά κυρίως. Όλα το ποσό που μαζεύουν από τις συμμετοχές θα πάει για φιλανθρωπικούς σκοπούς, παιδικά χωριά ΣΟΣ και τέτοιους οργανισμούς. Αποφασίσαμε λοιπόν μέσα σε 1-2 μέρες, βρήκαμε 4 άτομα από τα μέλη του ΔΟΣΟΥ και τις ομάδες εργασίας. Το ΆΙΣΑ κάθε chapter θα είναι παρόν, θα συμμετάσχει σε αυτόν τον αγώνα. Κωνσταντίνε.
Καλησπέρα και από μένα. Για όσους δεν με γνωρίζουν, είμαι ο Κώστας Παπαπαναγιώτου, είμαι συντονιστής της Ελληνικής Ομάδας Εργασίας του OWASP. Να ευχαριστήσω και εγώ από τη μεριά μου την Bryce Waterhouse και τον Μιχάλη Σαμιωτάκη που μεσολάβησε πολύ γρήγορα στο να γίνει η συνάντησή μας εδώ σήμερα και φυσικά όλο το Διοικητικό Συμβούλιο του ΙΖΑΚΑ Chapter. Να σας πω λίγα πράγματα για το OWASP, καθώς βλέπω αρκετές καινούργιες φυσιογνωμίες. Το OWASP είναι ένας διεθνής μη κερδοσκοπικός οργανισμός που σαν στόχο έχει την ενημέρωση όλων όσων ασχολούνται με την ασφάλεια του λογισμικού για το πώς μπορούν να αναπτύξουν ασφαλές λογισμικό, να το ελέγξουν και ούτω καθεξής. Λειτουργούμε με τη φιλοσοφία του ανοιχτού λογισμικού, άρα ό,τι παράγουμε είναι ελεύθερο σε πρόσβαση προς όλους και ανοιχτό προς χρήση. Άρα οποιαδήποτε εργαλεία, μεθοδολογίες, οτιδήποτε παράγουμε είναι με ανοιχτού λογισμικού και μπορείτε να έχετε πρόσβαση οποιαδήποτε χρονική στιγμή. Ορισμένα νέα τα οποία υπάρχουν σχετικά με το OWASP παγκοσμίως είναι μια καινούργια προσπάθεια που κάνουμε για να διευκολύνουμε τη συμμετοχή από εθελοντές. Η προσπάθεια αυτή λέγεται OWASP Global Initiatives και ουσιαστικά είναι ένα πλαίσιο το οποίο διευκολύνει οποιονδήποτε έχει κάποια ιδέα ή οποιονδήποτε θέλει να συμμετάσχει σε κάποιο έργο να το κάνει αυτό πάρα πολύ εύκολα. Υπάρχει ένα site μέσα στο wiki, αν πάτε ακόμα και στην αρχική μας σελίδα owasp.org θα βρείτε το link που σας καθοδηγεί στα OWASP Global Initiatives, όπου μπορείτε να δείτε ποια initiatives είναι αυτή τη στιγμή ενεργά, έργα που έχουν να κάνουν με συνέδρια, με εκπαιδευτικές ημερίδες, οτιδήποτε σχετικό, και να δηλώσει συμμετοχή ότι θέλει να βοηθήσει σε αυτά. Υπάρχουν συγκεκριμένες προδιαγραφές για το πόσο χρόνο χρειάζεται κάθε έργο συμμετοχή, τι χρόνο απαιτεί ή τι γνώσεις απαιτεί, ή ακόμα και να προτείνει κάτι το οποίο έχει σκεφτεί ο ίδιος. Πολλοί από εσάς γνωρίζετε ότι πέρσι είχαμε διοργανώσει το Πανευρωπαϊκό Συνέδριο του OWASP στην Αθήνα. Φέτος οργανώνεται στο Αμβούργο, στη Γερμανία, 20 με 23 Αυγούστου. Σήμερα δημοσιεύτηκαν οι εκπαιδεύσεις οι οποίες είναι διαθέσιμες για αυτό το συνέδριο. Αν πάτε στο appsec.eu μπορείτε να βρείτε το σχετικό υλικό και πολύ σύντομα θα ανακοινωθεί και το αρχικό πρόγραμμα του συνεδρίου. Αναμένουμε πολλά και ενδιαφέρουσα θεματολογία και πολλά και ενδιαφέροντα ονόματα. Ας πούμε, στις εκπαιδεύσεις υπάρχει μια εκπαίδευση για SAP Penetration Testing, η οποία είναι πάρα πολύ ενδιαφέρουσα και κατά πάσα πιθανότητα θα το επιβεβαιώσουμε μέσα στις επόμενες 2 εβδομάδες. Θα υπάρχει και κάποιος από την SAP, ο οποίος θα κάνει keynote address σχετικά με την ασφάλεια στο SAP. Στα εγχώρια τώρα νέα, αύριο και μεθαύριο συμμετέχουν στο συνέδριο κοινοτήτων ανοιχτού λογισμικού, το FOSCOM, το οποίο φέτος γίνεται στο Χαροκόπιο Πανεπιστήμιο στην Καλυθέα. Την Κυριακή είναι τα sessions για το security. Εμείς οργανώνουμε κάποιο workshop για security development και στη συνέχεια έχουμε και κάποιες πολύ ενδιαφέρουσες ομιλίες για penetration testing, για mobile security. Η συμμετοχή και η είσοδος είναι ελεύθερη. Όποιος θέλει μπορεί να έρθει από το Χαροκόπιο Πανεπιστήμιο και θα χαρούμε να τον δούμε και από κοντά. Τώρα, θα ήθελα να καλωσορίσω τον κύριο Martijn Grooten. Martijn, thank you for being here with us today. Ο κύριος Grooten έχει ένα background μαθηματικού. He has been a mathematician initially, doing research in mathematics, and for the past 5 or 6 years, you're into IT security. Your main areas of interest are anti-spam, so you are working for Virus Bulletin, doing comparative tests of anti-spam filters, and more recently web filters.
Correct, yeah.
So thank you for being here, and thank you for giving this talk to us.
Okay. Well, thank you, Kostas and Jotas for setting this up. Thanks everyone for coming. I've spoken at a few places before, from Dallas to Dublin, but I've never spoken a place I like so much as Athens. I'm actually a Dutchman. I grew up in the Netherlands. I've been living in England for about 7 years with my wife, who's from Greece. That's my link to Greece. Though unfortunately, after 7 years of being married, I still haven't been able to pick up the language, apart from a few words. So Excuse me for that. So I hope everyone can hear me. There will be plenty of time afterwards for questions. So this company, Virus Bulletin, I should have, because a few people have asked me already. As the name suggests, it was originally started as a magazine, a publication, which it still is. It's still every month technical publication about, well, like malware, spam. It was started when the problem was really viruses and when it was really kids in their back room, 14-year-olds finding ways to make to delete all your files. Things have changed a lot, and the company has changed a lot. We test various security products. We have an annual conference. We have a website with news, and we're active in social media and stuff. So I'll be talking about spam today, because I've been working with spam or against spam for the past 4 years, since November 2008, more or less. I'll get back to that later. What I've been doing is I've been testing spam filters, and basically what I've been doing is I've been sending a lot of emails through spam filters, a lot of spam, and I've been sitting there counting how much spam they blocked. And not just that, because it's not just about blocking spam, it's also about what we call false positives. A false positive is when an email that isn't spam is actually blocked, and that's probably worse than missing the old spam email. What I do not do is I don't actually run a spam filter. I run these, but I don't develop one. And I'm also not a system administrator. And that means I have probably a reasonably global overview of spam. But the problem with spam is that it differs a lot from organization to organization. So when I'm going to tell you, well, actually we're doing quite well, there are some organizations that have a real problem with spam because they get a lot of it, much more than you would expect given their size. And of course, you might happen to work for such an organization. Okay. So I don't just work with spam. I work with other kind of. I work for a company that deals with cybersecurity in general, and you've probably heard of Stuxnet, which was a malware written probably by the Americans and the Israelis to destroy activation of a nuclear plant in Iran. And that's really bad. And there's been a lot of news about cyber espionage, which people say comes mostly from China. I think it comes from a lot of countries. And that's really bad. And compared to that, spam, that's really cybercrime light. And I think it's good to be honest about this. Spam is not the worst problem we're dealing with at the moment. But it's still a problem. And there are two reasons why I think it's important that we continue to fight spam. And the first is that spam is intertwined with other kinds of cybercrime. I mean, for example, spam is sent through botnets. I think you probably know botnets are networks of compromised computers. So if you fight spam, you fight these botnets, and these botnets. So spam distributes malware that is used to send more spam or banking trojans. So fighting spam helps you fight other kinds of cybercrime. And the second thing is, and we may usually forget that, but spam is actually an attack on email. If we didn't do anything, email would have been unusable. We wouldn't be able to send emails because there would just be too much spam. So spam, I call it an uncoordinated DDoS attack on email in general. And that's good to realize, and that's one of the reasons why we're fighting spam. Because we like email. At least I like email. I think it's one of the best inventions of the internet. So the first half of this talk, or the first 2/3 probably, I'll be talking about how spam works and also how fighting spam works. And to this, it's good to imagine being a spammer. And actually, first, it's good to imagine just you're someone who wants to send a lot of emails. And there are many legitimate reasons. I mean, you work for companies, many of you do work for companies. Companies have customers, you may have business relationship with them, and you may want to send them an email about your new product. So imagine you have a white hat, you're a good person, and you want to send a lot of emails. Now, more emails than you can do in Gmail or Hotmail. You want to use your company account. This is not trivial. You need to find someone who can do this for you. This could be someone you hire. It could be you could find another company doing it for you. And this person, this company, this organization, this needs to have a network of machines to send the emails. An infrastructure. That's the word I'm looking for. And then you need to make sure that the emails that they aren't blocked by spam filters. This is not just the task of spam filters. This is also something that you, if you're sending a lot of emails, need to be aware of. And then you need to make sure that people actually open these emails, that they don't throw them away, that they read them. And then they need to engage with them and assume that there's a financial motive. You're sending this email, you want people to buy your product. You need to make sure that people receiving this email is turned into money somehow, and then this money needs to get back to you. That may seem trivial, but especially for spammers, it's not that trivial, because if you want to send a lot of spam, then actually, so you have a black hat, that you're a bad person, you want to actually send spam, then the situation is the same. You still need to find someone who can send these emails. They need to have an infrastructure that enables you to send these emails. You need to bypass the spam filters. You want people to open these emails, even though yes, they're spam. You probably hope that they won't believe they're spam. And you want to get money out of it, or something else. But spam, the motivation is usually money. So let's look at these things one by one. So finding a sender, finding a spammer, but finding someone who can help you send a lot of emails. Well, of course you can hire someone, and big companies like Amazon and Google, they have their own infrastructure. But if you're slightly smaller, you probably hire an external company. They're called email service providers, and these are just a few whose names I know. There's a lot of them, but it's a big business. And they're usually good at their job. And usually you have people working for them that don't like, that really hate spam, and that really fight spam. I mean, these companies have a mixed reputation in the anti-spam world. Some people say, well, they're actually spammers because they send a lot of emails and usually commercial nature, not that interesting. But actually, some of these companies, and I don't want to single out one, but some of these companies really have people working for them who really have done a lot fighting spam. Now, if you're a spammer, you usually can't hire these companies. At least the good ones, they'll find a way to make sure you they won't work with you, because it will damage their reputation. So you need to define spammer. Now, Roscoe, I don't know if you've heard of it, is the registry of known spam operators. It's a list of infamous spammers. This is not the list of people you can hire, and in fact, most of these people they're in jail now. But the point I'm trying to make, there are people who are spammers, and spam usually works in a way that the people selling the goods are not the same people as sending the emails. These are separate. So if you run a fake pharmacy, you sell fake Viagra, or you just sell cheap Viagra that's not licensed by the government, which has to be in many countries, or you sell fake Rolexes, fake watches. But you're looking for this kind of people. So how do you stop that? How do you stop people? Well, you make it illegal. You make sending spam illegal. Now this may seem trivial. I mean, of course it's illegal, but when the internet started, when email grew, and when more and more people got email, there weren't really serious anti-spam laws. And if there hadn't been any laws, then I think email would have died, because the anti-spam laws, they don't really help against big spammers, although it may help in some cases convict them. But big spammers, they're big cyber criminals. They don't really care all that much about the law, and they usually go to great lengths to avoid being arrested. But there are anti-spam laws, and they stop Amazon from sending you 10 emails a day if you don't want it. I mean, Amazon is known for sending a lot of emails, but if you tell them, I don't want it anymore, they actually stop sending them. And without laws, any company that you ever dealt with could just send you an email a day. Most countries have anti-spam law. Greece does one. I don't know the details, so perhaps someone, one of those questions, can actually inform us a bit about that. But spam is illegal, and sending spam is illegal in Greece. The most famous or infamous anti-spam law, and you're not supposed to be able to read this, but from the title is the Can Spam Act. It's the American anti-spam law, and America is of course the biggest, well, one of the biggest countries in the world when it comes to internet users. I think China is bigger these days. And Can Spam has a pretty bad reputation, I think rightly so. Can Spam is usually called the I Can Spam Act because it generally it kind of allows you to spam as long as you're open about who you are. You put the company's contact details at the bottom, and as long as you stop if people complain. Now I think that's the wrong order. I think you shouldn't send spam unless people. You shouldn't send emails unless people want to receive your emails. You shouldn't send emails and then stop if they tell you to. But that's how American law works. Now in this context, it's interesting to know that there's a new anti-spam law in Canada. Now Canada is just another country, and the Canadian law is much stricter, and they're really strict on sending spam, sending lots of emails. You really need to show that people want to receive these emails. It's being delayed all the time, but it's going to be introduced, I think, at the end of this year. And this is relevant because Canada and the US are kind of one market. If you're an American company, you don't really know which of your users are in Canada, especially if you just contact them via email. And most American companies have a presence in Canada, which means that they probably have to comply to this law even for their American users because they can't distinguish. And I'll get back to this to the American-Canadian case later on, but people think that this might help a lot with certain kinds of spam. Okay, so then you found a spammer or someone who can send a lot of emails, and these organizations need to have a network. Now the good guys, they have a network, lots of machines, IP addresses, usually not one IP range. IP addresses are extremely important in spam. There's something called reputation of IP addresses. If you're a good email service provider, you really want to make sure that your IP addresses maintain a good reputation. Spammers have something similar, except they're usually not their own machines. They're machines that are compromised. Because of this IP reputation thing, if you're a spammer and you just rented the server from any kind of hosting provider and you start sending 100,000 emails a day, within a few minutes you'll probably be blocked by everyone and you will not be able to send any more emails. So they distribute this and they use other people's compromised machines, and then what you get is a botnet. And botnets are a big problem. And most spam these days is sent via botnets, via compromised home PCs, and actually that's a fairly recent problem. Compromised hosts, web hosts. So, for example, if you run WordPress, you get compromised. What they do, they upload a PHP script that allows them to send email from the machine. I'm actually doing some research at the moment, and I'll probably be able to show that this kind of spam is harder to block. Spam sent from web hosts, from compromised web hosts, is harder to block. And that's probably not so surprising, because most of these web hosts do send legitimate email as well. So you can't just block them, or if you block them, you run into trouble. But botnets, and especially botnet spam when sent from compromised PC. You know, you have malware, and this malware on your PC means that your PC sends 10,000 emails a day. Now, in anti-spam, people tend to say, well, this is really bad. You know, 10,000 emails a day. It's probably a bit less, but you know, millions of emails when you combine all those machines, and that's really bad. And people talk about it as if spammers have infinite resources. Actually, in November 2008, a big botnet was taken down, or actually, that's not true, a big provider that provides infrastructure for botnets. Was called Makolo. That was taken down, and spam dropped a lot. Spam levels within a day halved, or even better than that, or worse, depending on whose side you're on. But actually, some guys from the University of Cambridge did some research, and they published a paper saying how much did shutting down Makolo help. What they found, this spam that wasn't sent anymore, it was actually easy to block. And botnet spam is by far the easiest to block for a number of reasons. And they all have to do with the fact that home PCs are not machines that send emails. And it's easy to detect that the spam came from a home PC. What people do is something called grey listing, where your mail server delays email for half an hour, saying, okay, try back in half an hour, and email is supposed to work this way. If you run a mail server and you send emails, the mail server is configured to retry again in half an hour and an hour for a number of days. You can actually turn off your mail server for a full day, and you're probably not going to miss a lot of emails. But spammers, they don't maintain this kind of infrastructure. They just send a lot of emails and that's it. And if it's blocked, if they can't send it, that's it. So botnet spam is a lot easier to block than other kinds of spam. So while we've done a lot of good work blocking, stopping botnets, that's not the biggest problem when you look at difficulty. So okay, so you have this infrastructure to deliver emails. Then you need to bypass spam filters. Even if you're a good guy or a good person, a good company, this is something you really have to worry about. If you don't do anything, even if you're not sending spam, some people will accidentally click on this is spam button, or some people think that your email is spam, and you run into trouble. So the first thing you need to do is to have a good feedback loop, which means that when someone in say Gmail clicks the this is spam button, that you get actually an alert, and not just Gmail but all the big internet providers, so that you know when people think your email is spam, you can adjust. You can think, okay, we're doing something wrong here. Spammers don't care about that generally, and what they do is they just send a lot of emails. Now there's a lot more you can do to avoid being blocked. So for example, you can publish the range of IP addresses that you, from your domain, sends email from. That's called SPF, Standard Policy Framework. This is definitely not some kind of silver bullet that really stops all spam, but it does help a bit. It does help prevent your emails from being blocked, at least a bit, because it kind of shows, okay, this really came from us. Spammers don't generally bother with that, they just send even more emails. There are other things you can sign the emails digitally, kind of proving, okay, this is really our domain that sent it. It's something called DKIM. And spammers again send a lot of emails. Spammers just send more and more emails. Well, not more and more, but they just send a lot of emails instead of dealing with these kind of problems. However, it's not true that spammers don't really try to bypass spam filters. Especially 5 to 10 years ago, there was a big cat and mouse game going on between spammers and spam filters. And they did things like this. I mean, it's easy to write a filter that blocks the word Viagra. There are probably not many people write about Viagra in non-spam emails, although it does help. It does happen, sorry. This is an HTML table. Now, it is pretty hard. I don't know if you know a bit about HTML, but if you look at the HTML code of this, it doesn't. The word Viagra doesn't occur. It's just the number of cells, and these cells have colors. I like this one because my wife actually discovered this, and it's nice when someone who's not as in security finds something related to my work. But this actually is. This is kind of rare. This is more typical what happened 10 years ago. Now, I don't know if you can read it, and probably not, and that's the whole point. I mean, spammers So spam filters started detecting bad words like Viagra. People started replacing the I in Viagra with the number 1, which still makes people be able to read it as Viagra. But spam filter didn't block it. Spam filters were updated. People started putting things in images. Spam filters used programs called OCRs that could read images, so they started to distort their images. It's probably pretty hard to block, but I mean, the image is distorted. It's kind of twisted. The actual URL doesn't occur, but in the email, but it tells you, well, don't click, just type farm77.com in the address bar of your browser. I think if you send this kind of emails, the content is probably unlikely to make it be blocked, unless you send a lot of the same emails. But they usually distort emails in a slightly different way for every email they send. However, I don't think that many people receiving these emails will actually think this is something genuine. And that's probably why spammers at some point just gave up. They seem to have given up trying to make the emails bypass the filters. And most spam you see these days looks pretty normal as text with some HTML. And it's pretty obvious looking at it what the purpose is. Okay, so once the email is delivered, once you've bypassed the spam filter, whether you're good or bad, you're not there. I mean, people still need to open the email, need to do whatever you want them to do. So if you're a good sender, I choose Amazon because I like this example. They do a lot of psychology, I think, to make sure that you do what it says in the email. And to make sure that Amazon doesn't just send you your random things that are on offer. They send things that they think, because you clicked on them, you may like. I like this example. This happened to me actually. I bought some pedal bin liners. And 2 days later, Amazon sent me an email saying that people who usually buy pedal bin liners buy pedal bins as well. Which is always kind of sweet. Obviously, I already had a pedal bin. That's why I bought these liners. But now, spammers, they do similar things. They know, probably by now, that most people don't want to buy illegal Viagra. And definitely not, if they do want to buy it, they don't want to buy it through spam. So what they do is they send YouTube notifications, or Facebook notifications, or LinkedIn notifications. And, you know, I'm on Facebook, I'm on LinkedIn, I have a YouTube account. You know, if I would get this kind of email, I would think, oh wow, yeah, perhaps I should click on that. You know, it looks like a YouTube link. Of course, this is not YouTube link. And if you know a bit about spam, you probably think, okay, this is clear. This is phishing for your YouTube account details. And since in the past 2 years or so, a lot of this kind of spam doesn't go to phishing anymore. What happens is that it just goes to pharmacy. I don't really know why this. I mean, I'm not a spammer, and I don't know the psychology of spammers, but they probably think, okay, we want people to go to our website. If we just say, hey, this is an illegal pharmacy, people are not going to click. So we send a YouTube link, and people will click. And perhaps they decide, oh well, now that I'm here, let me buy some Viagra for the weekend, as it's advertised. Another thing that happens is that more and more spam links to malware. And then what happens is you go to a website, and through a drive-by download, malware tries to install on your computer. And these scams are usually kind of clever in that, depending on where you come from, what browser you use, you either get something pretty harmless spam, or you get malware. There's been a recent campaign where you got a weight loss website, which is pretty harmless, unless you visit from Android. Then you get Android malware. But that's kind of interesting, and it's also interesting because most researchers miss this, including me for a long time until someone alerted me. I'd actually opened these links. I found, okay, there's a weight loss spam. That's harmless. And then someone said, "You tried opening it in Android." And this is not something you should try at home, but unless you know what you're doing and do it in a virtual machine, which is what I do. And that's, I think, a good lesson. Don't just click on links in spam once in a safe environment, and then draw conclusions from that. Know that it might only work for certain IP addresses or for certain browsers or etc. Okay, and now for some reason people have opened your email and you want money. Not all emails, and not even all spam is about money. I've seen religious spam, but most spam and a lot of legitimate bulk email does have a financial motive. And it's pretty easy, you know, that there's Visa, MasterCard, PayPal, there's other ways to make people pay. That's not a huge problem. Now, if you're a spammer, that is a problem, because you want, until this, you've been able to be somewhat anonymous. But now you need to get the money. You don't want someone else to get it, so you need to find a way to use the money. You can apply with Visa, but when Visa discovers you're a spammer, they probably get rid of you. Now, this is from our website because I wrote about it. A group of researchers from a university, I think it's San Diego, somewhere in California, they did something interesting. They actually bought things from spam. They clicked on spam and they started buying things. Now, this is something that's dubious because the spammers would get some money, but they decided, and I think there's a good argument for that. They decided, you know, the spammers get a bit of money, but we learn a lot about what happens to spam. That would be very interesting. And what they learned is that they worked together with the banks, provided them with credit cards. And so they could trace what happened. And they found actually 95% of spam went through 3 banks. One in Latvia, one in Azerbaijan, and one, I think, in St. Kitts, which is a small Caribbean island. This is interesting because it could mean that, you know, this is the weak point. If we just convince these 3 banks, at least the Latvian one, once they discovered, they immediately shut down the links with these spammers. If we could find if these 3 banks could stop dealing with spammers, then spammers wouldn't be able to make money. I think that there is actually that there's something in there. I'm also a bit suspicious that it may just be a coincidence. It may just be that spammers use these banks because there are not that many spammers out there. They just know from each other these are good banks. If we shut down these 3 banks, they find 3 other banks. And I know there are lots of good banks, and I know lots of you work for banks, but there are also quite a few banks, especially in dodgy countries, that are willing to turn a blind eye to whatever business you're running. Okay, so I hope I've given a bit of a picture of what happens in spam and how spam works. November 2008, I've mentioned it before, that's kind of when I started working with spam. And I like to pretend it's related, but it's completely unrelated, but that's an important point in spam. The Makolo host was taken down. This in itself was not so important because spammers quickly found other hosts. But it was the first big takedown, and the first, at this point, spam levels stopped rising. I mean, until 2008, that has always fluctuated a lot, but if you look at the long-term view, spam levels went up. In November 2008, they went down. They went down a lot in the beginning, they crept up again, but since then, fluctuating, but still, spam levels have gone down. Today, spam levels today are about 1/6 of what they once were. That's huge. I mean, that's a success that's almost unprecedented in cybercrime. And the quantitative problem of spam, the fact that, as I mentioned, this spam is actually some kind of DDoS attack on email. Not that someone wants to attack it, but spam had the potential to take email down, to make email useless. Many people have predicted this 5-10 years ago, saying, you know, email in a few years' time, we will stop using it. And that isn't there. I think email has won. The problem of spam has not been solved. We still get spam. We still get a lot of spam. That's still the majority of email. And actually, I think it's unlikely have it be solved. And I don't mean this as some kind of pessimistic, oh, there'll always be bad guys, and you know, perhaps we will live in an ideal world where no one does any kind of crime, and then spam will be solved. But spam is a feature of email, it's not a bug. Email allows you to send a lot of messages very easily, and it allows you to send messages to people you've never been in contact with. I mean, when I first emailed the other house, I've never had a previous contact before. We kind of knew each other through Twitter, but at some point we were we didn't know each other, and then we still managed to get in touch. So that's great, and that's an important feature of email, as is the fact that you can send a lot of emails very easily. And as such, spam is some kind of feature. And I think that's important because we're doing rather well fighting spam. I mean, spam levels spam catch rates, the filters, they're a bit worse than they were 5 years ago, because this botnet spam was so easy. But you know, they're still doing rather well. And because of this, because we're dealing with it, we don't have to fix email. I hang around in circles where people discuss email, and there's still this belief even among some experts that actually we need to replace email, that email is broken, that we need to get something better. And I disagree. I think the fact that we're doing so well shows that. I mean, I'm open to any suggestions saying, oh, well, if we change email to this, then okay. But perhaps there is a better way of email. I don't see it, and I haven't seen any example. And I know many people have tried to come up with new plans of email, and they either involve some kind of authentication, which breaks the property of email, that you can send email to random people, to unsolicited, that you can send unsolicited emails. Which I think is an important feature of email. I mean, not that you can send spam to random people, but that you can contact people that you've not been in touch with through email. Perhaps a schoolmate from 20 years ago, find your email address. They don't have to, you might not have been in touch with them for 20 years. They don't, you can send them an email. They don't need to authenticate. They don't need to find someone who can connect you, as it happens on social networks. And the second, a lot of so-called improvements to email that use authentication break this property. Other so-called improvements, they're based on the fact that they make it very hard to send email. They put a threshold. You need to pay a small sum, but still some money to send an email. Or you need to do a huge computation on your computer. It's not too hard to imagine this to work. It's a lot harder to replace email because more than 2 billion people are using it. So it's not easy to replace it, but it's not hard to imagine something where if you want to send an email, you need to make some kind of computation. But the problem is, this will mean a lot of people who do send email now would not be able to. A lot of companies would not be able to, because you need to put a threshold high enough for spammers, and spammers' resources are not unlimited. Botnets have their limits too, even though people tend to think it's unlimited, but still they have huge resources and they could do these computations. And if your idea is based around paying money, they can steal this money from others through their botnets. So we don't have to fix email. It also means that because filters are still good, and I think just about everyone uses the spam filter. If not directly, their ISP uses it for that. My company works with anti-malware as well. And the big problem in anti-malware is that just so many people don't have any kind of anti-malware. And I know there's an argument anti-malware doesn't help a lot, and it might not help against the most advanced threats, but it helps against the most basic threats. And a lot of people get infected with the most basic threats because they don't have anti-malware. So it really matters if malware authors manage to spread their malware a lot. It matters if it gets to a lot of computers, because it will eventually not be blocked, because nothing is trying to block it. with spam, just about everyone has a spam filter. It doesn't really matter if a spammer sends a billion emails. What matters is how much gets through. Either because the spam filter misses it, or, and that's important, or because it actually blocked it. That people somehow were convinced when they saw it in quarantine or in the spam folder that it wasn't spam. I'll comment, there's an important example about this in a little bit. Because there are still problems to be dealt with. We're doing well compared to almost every other kind of cybercrime, but we're not there, and we have some problems. And I'll talk a little bit about a few problems. Snowshoe spam. If you didn't live in Greece, but if you lived in Sweden or Canada, you'd probably be familiar with this. This is a bit old-fashioned, but this is a snowshoe. You put in, it's a lot bigger than your foot. You put your feet into these kind of things, and then you can walk on snow. And the idea is that this spreads the load, so you don't sink into the snow, but the load is spread. What does it have to do with spam? There's something called snowshoe spam, which means it's relatively low volume. And it's also, the snowshoe spammers, they use a lot of usually legitimate companies to send their email through. And they send a bit from here and a bit from there. And most spam filters, they work around the idea that, you know, spam, if 1 million emails are sent, then thousands of them will reach their customers. So they'll notice, hey, this is the same email that contains to be sent to everyone. This must be spam. So after the first dozen or so emails, they start blocking it automatically. Now, if you spread the load, if they come from different IP addresses, if you don't send very much, then you actually go a long way towards avoiding this spam filter. And this is a problem. It's also a problem because some of this is actually illegal in America. And the Can-Spam Act, depending on what kind of spam you send, but some of this is actually illegal. It makes it also harder to block. You can't just get people in prison. I mean, there are some spammers in the US in prison, but some of these might not be. Targeted email attacks, they're not really spam. I mean, this has been in the news a lot, you know, people could be from China, but they're probably from everywhere, but China has been in the news. Someone from China sends you an email, pretends to be a colleague or a business associate, and as an attachment, it sounds interesting, you open it, and malware gets onto your company's network, and you don't realize. They use this malware to open a backdoor, and they steal all your information, and they copy your product, and they sell it for half the price. That's. I'd like to stress again, this is not just China, but China has been in the news a lot. This particular email, which was discovered, the particular email was discovered by a guy from F-Secure in Finland. It was sent to a company called RSA. RSA, they're a big security company. They work a lot with the American government, with American defense contractors. Among other things, they provide these key tokens that you use to log in. I got one. That's in my bag. There are two important things about this email. Well, three important. The first one is that this contained a so-called recruitment plan. And this sounds, you know, if you get an email like your work recruitment plan, you want to read it. You want to see, hey, am I included in next year's recruitment plan? Do they want to hire someone for my job, or do they want to get rid of me? Or how much do my colleagues make? You know, you can see why someone wants to open it. It contained a 0-day exploit in Excel and allowed people to get into the email and into the system of RSA. The second important thing is that this email has an estimate cost of $66 million. That was the loss of RSA. They had to replace a lot of these key tokens. They had to do a lot of investigation. I think this is the most expensive email ever sent. There's one more further important detail that relates to something I said earlier. This email was actually blocked by a spam filter. Someone saw this email in their quarantine and thought, this can't be spam, this must be legitimate, and opened it. And you know, I work with spam filters, and I work with the technical properties of spam filters. You know, can they block it? But there's a psychological. I mean, what do you do once you blocked it? All spam filters, I've never come across a spam filter that never made a mistake, that never accidentally blocked something. Which means that there should be a way for people to retrieve these emails if they're accidentally blocked. But what if they are wrong and you are right? And I don't know if this happens a lot. This may be a very rare example. I also know that if you're so big that you have 0 days to your, you can use 0-day exploits, and that you can send the kind of emails to $66 million harm, then you can probably avoid being blocked by a spam filter. So that probably didn't even try very hard. This is another thing. This is semi-related to spam, and this is something I've read about recently, and I've not really heard it being a problem yet, but it could be something. That's called email flooding. There are criminals that are offering services where they can send 25,000 emails to someone for $25. And this is not spam. The emails don't advertise anything. All the emails do is block someone's inbox. And that's very annoying. That's annoying. Imagine coming to work and having 25,000 emails in your inbox, plus 20 that you actually won't need to read. And they can actually do it. They can send 100,000 emails for $70, and they claim about 60% that isn't blocked of these emails. And you know, never trust anything cyber criminals say, but I can kind of imagine this. I mean, if you don't need to sell anything, if all you need to do is send emails, and you have huge networks, you'll probably get a high delivery rate. You can just use emails that have been sent by others, because you hacked into your email account, you can send them again. So why would they do that? Well, imagine you're a network administrator. You get alerts when something odd happens. You get an email alert. But you also get 25,000 emails. You might miss the alert. And if the alert is about the same criminals trying to transfer money out of your bank account, you might miss it. There's been a lot of DDoS attacks on banks in the US, in the Netherlands, in other countries. It's still a bit vague why this happens, but if banks are being DDoSed through their website, this may happen as well. Again, it's something I haven't really heard that someone being a victim of. It may also be that people are quiet about this, but it's a potential problem. There's one more thing that I don't have on the slide, but I realized a lot of people here are from banks. A lot of people, phishing is a problem. Phishing is a problem for two reasons. Firstly, people might fall for it, people might lose their money. You probably want to pay them because if people stop using online banking, they'll come to the branch and it's much more expensive. But there's another problem. I mean, I have some bank accounts in the UK, and I get at least one letter a week with my current statement of number of accounts. I think that's a huge waste. I think it would be so great if they could do this through email. And my bank, for some reason, doesn't dare to, and I kind of see why, because they're so worried that people will block, that emails will be blocked, or that spammers will send the same kind of emails, but then using phishing. I think this is a problem. I think this is why phishing. It's another reason why phishing is a problem and why spam is a problem. Is that it stops our ability to send some kind of legitimate email. Okay, I'm almost done. A lot of research I've presented here is not done by me, it's done by others. There's some very website that I think you should have a look at. Krebs on Security, Brian Krebs is a security journalist, he's quite well known. He has done a lot of research into the cybercrime world. He hangs around with a pseudonym on Russian forums where spammers and malware authors hang out, and he knows a lot about their dealings. He's published chat logs between the two infamous Russian spammers. This second one is Stefan Savage from University of California in San Diego. His group has done some research where they actually follow the spam, and they found out that they only used three banks. COMOS is the Coalition Against Unsolicited Commercial Email, which is a North America-based group who've done a lot of work towards anti-spam legislation. They were the guys behind the Canadian anti-spam law that I mentioned. Virus Bulletin, that's my company. We are independent of all security vendors. So I didn't single out anyone here, but most security vendors have blogs that teach you a lot about cybercrime and about spam, and they're great to read. So thank you. This is my email address if you have any questions, but you can ask questions now. But on Twitter, the company's website again, LinkedIn. We have a lot of time for questions. And then, even if it's not related to this, but just spam in general, you just want to contribute your own story, because as I mentioned, I have a general overview, but spam spam differs a lot between companies and between organizations. So I might be telling you, actually we're doing quite well, but for some reason your company might just have stopped using email because of spam. Any questions? Yes. Yes. Sorry? Actually, so the question is, I don't know if everyone can hear it. I run, as my job, I test spam filters, and I have a database of spam. There's two things. I don't have a database. And people don't generally use a database of spam, because spam changes so much in subtle ways. But having a filter that's very good at blocking last year's spam is pointless. You need to have a live stream, because spam changes in subtle ways from day to day, from hour to hour. So I don't have a database. I could have feeds of spam, and actually I'm using other people's feeds. Because there are some organizations that are very good at collecting spam. I want to have a global feed of spam. It's very hard for anyone to collect this, so that I use the feeds that people are. Sorry? I'm archiving them for a few, but not. I don't have resources to store them forever. I think there are some databases of spam available, and some of these feeds are you can at least buy them. Yeah.
Further from mail spam.
Yes.
Do you have any info about VoIP spam?
VoIP. That is a big problem. Voice over IP. I don't know a lot about this. I know that it's difficult to block. There's two kinds of voice. There's voice over IP spam, what I call a normal landline, a normal phone line, and what I call things like Skype. In both cases, especially when I call the landline, it's pretty difficult to block. I know the American Trade FTC, the Federal Trade Commissioner. They recently offered some money to people who claim they can do well against blocking robocalls, because most of these calls are automated. They're not real humans behind it. But it's still very hard to block. But if you could somehow detect automatically if it's a robot calling you, you could alert it.
So whether it's two different philosophies, two different discussions.
Yeah. Yeah. So it's I mean we can learn a bit about email spam, but the important thing about email is very open. I mean, you have the email headers, you can see where the email comes from. A lot of it may not be true, you can't trust it, but still you have a lot of information that you can use. Voice spam or SMS spam, text messages, that's a big problem. Especially in countries where sending SMS is cheap, as in Asia. It's a huge problem there. The majority of SMS, I think, is spam in China. But you don't have as much information about the SMS, you just have 160 characters. That's a lot less to block something. Yeah?
I've got one question regarding spam filters.
Yes.
Do they actually inspect the content of the email?
The question is, do spam filters inspect the content of the email? Almost all of them do, yes. Are you worried about it?
Well, there is a little bit of a problem there because we have to consider privacy issues.
That's true, yeah.
And there's a big debate in the European Union regarding net neutrality, as far as what is allowed to pass and what is not allowed to pass. And, it is a big issue when you're actually looking at someone's email.
Yeah.
So
that's true. I know the American net neutrality laws make an explicit exception for spam filters and other kinds of filters. You are allowed. I don't know about the EU. You probably know more about this than I do, but I know in the US where net neutrality became law, I think a few years ago. Don't know the details, but I know there's been an explicit exception for spam filters. You're allowed to check the content of email, like you're allowed to check certain other kinds of content. But there's definitely a privacy issue. But I mean, email goes over the open internet. If you are really worried, if you're a sender of email and you're worried that someone reads it, you need to encrypt it, and then you can't unencrypt it. I don't know of any spam filter that requires private encryption keys to work. But it's definitely something to be aware of. And I know a lot of. I mean, I'll be talking about inbound spam filtering, but if you are, especially if you're a big organization, you send a fair amount of emails. You may start sending spam. Someone might hack into your system. Someone might get a Trojan, and they may use your legitimate mail server for sending spam. So outbound spam filtering is important. And then a lot of the outbound spam filters, they actually not just check for spam, but they also check if no confidential information is leaked. I don't know how good they are. I haven't tested that, but content scanning is. I mean, I'm focused on spam filters. So I think of, that's a good idea. But you're very right. There is another side of if I use a spam filter or let someone else check the content of my email. Perhaps they send it through their mail to the headquarters and they all laugh about it, or they do it for work. Yeah.
If we focus on the mailing list, so I compromise a PC and I manage to get their address book. So I start amassing a mailing list. What other techniques are people using? Like I assume mailing lists are being sold on the black market as well. I can buy 1 million addresses or something. What are you seeing there in terms of?
That's a very good question. I don't think there's a lot of things known about that. I know list of addresses are sold. Sometimes just bulk. This is 1 million email addresses. Sometimes they say this is 500,000 email addresses in Greece, which is nice because if you're, at least from a spammer's point of view, because you can send spam in Greek. Or this is 20,000 emails of Greek doctors. You can even target it even more. A lot of it's being sold. How these addresses are being harvested there's not a lot known about it. I know the cliche, the old-fashioned technique is go to websites. People publish reports on websites, but almost everyone gets spammed, and most people's addresses are not on websites. So what also happens, I don't know the details about it, but I'm absolutely certain what happens is that some malware just scans your address book, and not just your address book, but just your emails for. And one reason why I know this is that if you know a bit about emails, in email headers there's a message ID. That's something, the unique identifier for the message. That's not an email address, but it looks like one. There's some random string and an @ and then usually your domain. And people get spam or mail servers get spam on this, and it kind of shows them. Not so glad spammers check this. And the ones out there, they sell it among themselves. They usually add some fake addresses as well to boost their sales.
Have you seen any tools that generate just the names, like they can sit there and, like you're doing a dictionary tag on a password, but just will randomly create names and then just send them like that?
I don't think I haven't seen as much as some people claim it happens. I think it's not a very effective because you need to send a lot of emails to get a good user. What happens is very common first names, American or English first names, Tom, John, @ domain. I think if you've got this kind of address, you probably get a lot of spam. But I've seen random addresses that were completely unrelated to anything, and what probably just happens is that they just combine the local part of the domain of one address and the domain of another address, add it on their list, and so they get more to sell. Yeah.
Do you think that we have less spam today because we have better spam and spam filters, or because cybercriminals prefer other types of roles which are much more profitable?
I think both. I think well, the main reason that we get less spam is not so much that we have better spam filters, but because we managed to take down, other people managed to take down botnets. They become quite effective at taking down botnets. That's why less spam is being sent in the first place. The fact that we've got good spam filters means that what is being sent, a lot of it is still blocked. But it's also true that if you have a botnet, if you're sending spam is probably not the most, not the financially best thing you can do with your botnet. You can get people's, steal people's online banking details with keylog, login details for email accounts. That's probably not a lot more cost effective. So that's another reason. I mean, yeah. In a way, if someone has a botnet, from a security point of view, the best they can do is send spam because it's relatively harmless. And it also means it's very easy to detect. If they use the botnet as a proxy to visit websites, to buy illegal goods, you know, you're a Russian criminal. You've hacked a Greek computer, and you've also stolen Greek credit cards from a different source. You use a Greek computer as a proxy to buy things with your Greek credit card that's stolen. There's nothing from a security point of view, nothing unusual happens. You know, some Greek computer makes a purchase from a Greek web shop with a Greek credit card. So that's a lot harder to block than a Greek home computer sending emails, which home computers don't do. They don't send direct emails, they send it through a mail server. So in that sense, sending spam is a relatively harmless thing to do, and it's probably not the best ways cybercriminals can utilize botnets. And that probably contributed as well to the decline in spam. Yeah.
Are there any spam filters dedicated to stopping outgoing spam instead of incoming spam?
I know at least one that, as far as I know, is really only focused on this. Most spam filters you can use in your company can do both. And that's actually a good thing, because if they combine it, if you know who your users send email to, you kind of have an idea of what kind of emails they normally get. You know, if I know that you sent to him, and then he sent you an email, I think it's probably not spam, because you've emailed him before. I know at least one company that sorry? Which one? It's called Mail Channels. It's a Canadian company, and they do it for ISPs. I think they only do outbound. But you know, for big ISPs, you can't really do this kind of profiling because you get privacy issues again. Whereas for a company, it's more normal. Yeah.
Most spammers are also on the botnets of the internet from the underground market, because it's different type of business to create and operate the botnet and to send spam or to develop malware or to send content.
So the question is, are spammers and those running botnets the same? Depends who is the spammer. Who do you call the spammer? Is the spammer the person who sends the emails or who advertises the product? As I showed in my picture, it's not the same. I mean, you have a shop selling fake Rolex watches, and you hire someone else to send emails, and this person may have created his own botnet, or may even use someone else's botnet. It's not always the same. Yeah, it's almost like a normal economy. There's a lot of you provide a service, and there's a market for it. And yeah.
Any favorite spam filters?
I wouldn't be able to say that. I mean, I'm neutral, and there are quite there are a lot of them that are really good, and depending on your, it's a good thing, you know. Sometimes I would like it if spam folders weren't as good as they are, because it would make my job more interesting. But actually, you know, most of them are good. And that's interesting. I mean, most spam is blocked by everyone. I think that sometimes up to 75 or 80% of spam is blocked by every spam filter. So yeah, but lots of them are good. The reports I write are online, and at least the summary is free to read. So yeah, have a look. Yeah. Yeah, I've been testing open source spam folders. And actually, I test them for free. I mean, I test a closed source spam folders. People pay a fee to be tested. Well, not closed source, commercial spam folders, but free and open source spam folders. I test for free. I only tested one properly. It's called scroll out. Which is, the problem with open source is that it usually requires a lot of administration to set it up. And I think it's not fair to do that, or have someone do it for me and then say, because this is what you pay for with a commercial product. I mean, a lot of commercial products are based around open source. They just repack spam as install it for you.
Σας ευχαριστούμε όλους. Η αριστερή πλευρά πάντως στις ερωτήσεις ήταν με την άλλη φορά πρέπει να σας μοιράσουμε. Γιατί μην το πάρετε πολιτικά, πρέπει να σας μοιράσουμε πάντως. Κάπου υπάρχει λίστα με τις υπογραφές. Εάν κάποιοι δεν έχουν υπογράψει, είναι κάπου εδώ κάποιοι που δεν έχουν υπογράψει. Η λίστα είναι, έχει φτάσει και αυτή αριστερά. Φεύγοντας, σας παρακαλώ μόνο τις φόρμες αξιολόγησης ή τις αφήνετε πάνω στο γραφείο και τις μαζεύουμε ή τις αφήνουμε σε ένα άλλο γραφείο εδώ μπροστά ώστε να μπορούμε να τις συγκεντρώσουμε. Οι βεβαιώσεις για τα CP θα σας τα σταλούν ηλεκτρονικά, είσαστε αρκετοί, επομένως θα πάρει λίγο καιρό, προσωπημένα με ένα προς έναν. Η παρουσίαση του Μάρτιν θα ανέβει στο isaka.gr. Κωνσταντίνα, θα συνεννοηθούμε και πώς θα γίνει και με τον OWASP, θα ενημερωθείτε και από εκεί. Σας ευχαριστούμε και πάλι, καλό Σαββατοκύριακο. Σας περιμένουμε και την Τετάρτη στην Ελληνοαμερικανική Ένωση. Σήμερα το βράδυ θα βγει επίσημα η ανακοίνωση από το chapter. Ο Κωνσταντίνος θα την πάρει από τον OWASP και θα μπορέσει να την μοιράσει στις Αμερικές. Ευχαριστούμε.